Hi, everyone. This is Stephanie from Vegan Mainstream, and I am excited about doing Webinar Wednesday for the month of March. This is a really exciting topic for me. I love talking about sales and marketing and understanding customers and really kind of the sales flow because while it's exciting to look at tools like social media, email marketing, and so forth, what I like about thinking about things like sales and understanding sales is we're looking at it more as a flow, meaning how do these tools, how do things work together so you can basically achieve the results you want. So, what I'm looking forward to tonight is really walking you through that process, laying the groundwork, and getting you kind of ready for either building a flow or if you already have a flow, how do we tweak it and make it better? All right. So before we get started, I want to do some quick logistics. Hopefully, you guys are on the webinar page and you're able to hear me. We do have the comment box on the page. So if you are listening, just scroll down slightly on the page and you should be able to see a Facebook comment box. If you could just quickly let me know if you're able to hear me clearly. We don't have any volume issues or anything like that. Just want to make sure we go through logistics as well as I'd love it if you guys said hello, just so I know that you are out there, because what I like to do in these webinars is make them as interactive as we can. So I want to make this fun. We have a really good sized group registered for this webinar. So I really hope we can make this interactive and so forth. So it looks like we have some people here. Sounds like everything is working for everyone. So as people trickle in, they can get caught up, but let's just walk through some basic logistics. This will be recorded, so you'll be able to watch it afterwards. If you have to step out for a minute or you miss anything, don't worry. You can always come back to the replay and listen. And we normally leave the replays up for about, I think, 45 days after the webinar. So you will have complete access to all the goodies and everything we talk about tonight. Other than that, I'll also send out a copy of the slides or any slides that you need. If you have any follow-up questions, just let us know. If you have questions during the presentation, please just post them in the comments at the bottom. It's a great way because I can peek down at the comments while I'm talking and answer any questions that come up along the way. So you don't have to wait till the end. I think it's a fun way that I can hopefully address anything that you're thinking, considering, and so forth. Okay, so with that, let's get started and talk about understanding sales. Now, I did this as kind of a two-part webinar. So this segment that we're going to be talking about tonight is kind of understanding sales, and then we have another webinar next month where we're going to talk about optimizing it. So if you haven't registered for our other free webinar next month, I highly recommend it, because where this goes hand in hand and how this all kind of works is I want to make sure we have a good foundation as far as how you drive sales, how do you actually market, how do you pull all the pieces together, and what it means to build that. So for some of you, you may already have it. Some of you need some tweaking. I want to make sure we get that good foundation in place. And then as we go into the second webinar, we'll talk about ways and places that you can make it super duper special, super duper cool, very interactive, or more cutting edge, or things like that. But without that foundation, sometimes when we jump into the cutting edge stuff, we can miss pieces of the process. So that's why I want to make sure we build that foundation. But don't worry, we won't be all about theory tonight. We will definitely be giving you some tips and some things that you can do right away. So the first thing I start with when I talk about understanding sales is really making sure that as you're thinking about yourself, thinking about your business, thinking about what you do in your business and where you spend your time, I want to make sure that you are doing kind of a check on yourself to say, how much time do I dedicate to sales? And what I like for people to do is think about this on a weekly basis. Now, the reason this is important is because there's so many things going on in our business. You can be in customer service issues, you can be in product development issues. And what happens is we can find that maybe we're not getting the results we want from a sales standpoint. And sometimes that's because we just don't have enough focus on it. Now, for some of you who have bigger businesses, you have sales teams and so forth, sales managers, they may be feeling this function for you. But many of you out there I know are small businesses. You're working with either you're a solopreneur, maybe you have 2, 3 people, a couple people part-time. If that's the case, I want to make sure that I kind of press upon you today is to make sure you dedicate some time each week to sales, even if it's an hour, even if it's 2 hours a week. And what that time should be around is, number one, reviewing your sales process, meaning understanding what are the tools you have in place and making sure things are actually working correctly. Emails are going out if you're doing kind of an email marketing series when people sign up for an autoresponder. If you're doing mailings, or if people are being pushed to a phone number to make phone calls, make sure the phone calls are coming in, people have scripts. You want to make sure from a logistics standpoint that you're not doing all this great work to get people to sign up and there's a little bit of a gap, or there's some challenges there. So you want to make sure there's some review around that. And then the other thing we want to do is we want to have some metrics around your sales flow, around your sales process. How many people are coming to your website? How many people are signing up for your email list? How many people click on things? How many people, not only do they click, how many people of those people are buying? And the reason we want to have some visibility to those metrics is we want to use those as, first off, benchmarks, so we know what is happening in your business, what's happening today. And then as you take some of the advice tonight, as you start to continue to increase and change and build your sales kind of flow and process, that we can see where the improvement's happening. So if you have those metrics in place, you can clearly and easily see, oh, you know what, I'm getting more people on the site, or I'm finding that more people are clicking on my emails, or I'm finding that more people are buying, even though I have the same amount of people coming to my site. For some reason, I'm seeing more people buy. And therefore, we can not only celebrate wins, but we can also find out if there's gaps, or if those numbers go down, what are the things we need to change. Does that kind of make sense to everybody? Kind of why you need to dedicate time? And just maybe a quick question around the table, since we have the comments enabled, is let me know, how much time do you currently dedicate to those processes, either reviewing those metrics or looking at your process on a weekly basis to understand that there are no gaps, there are no holes, there's no nothing that's kind of creating a leaky bucket from a sales standpoint. So if you can just post in the comments if you're spending an hour a week, 2 hours a week, not enough time, you try to get to it when you can, just, give me some feedback, because I really would love to know where everyone is. And as we talk today, I can continue to kind of cater things to where everyone is on the call tonight. Okay. So let's start jumping into the steps. Now, I did this kind of webinar as a kind of step 1, 2, 3, 4, and so forth, just so when you think about implementing this in your business, you can go through this step-by-step process. You can start to put this in place. And really what we're trying to do tonight is we're trying to put in a flow. We're trying to make sure, and I don't know how many of you guys are familiar with marketing funnels or sales funnels, and I'm going to use marketing and sales a little bit interchangeable tonight, just to make it very kind of simple. There are a little bit of difference in what happens in kind of the marketing portion versus the sales portion, but I don't think we need to get into all that theory. I think really the key here is that what we're trying to do is pull people into the funnel, nurture those people so we can turn them into potential customers, and then determine how do we close that deal. Now, for many of you, you may be like, well, I don't know if I'm doing all this internet marketing mumbo jumbo. And I'm not trying to say that you have to be an internet marketing business. You could be a brick and mortar business and you still need a funnel. You can be a business that does things online and offline. You may sell a physical product. Maybe you do vegan makeup. Maybe you do vegan shoes, belts. Maybe you're a person that does consulting and coaching. So even though you may do a lot of things online, you may not see yourself as an internet business. I want you to kind of shed that cloak in a sense, that this isn't about whether you do online or offline. This is about having a process so that to drive sales, you've probably heard those comments people say that it takes like 7 or 12 touch points to turn someone into a customer. That stuff is so true. And the reason it's true is what happens is people need to hear about your brand, see your brand, interact with your brand, hear about a friend who maybe has purchased from it. There's all these different things that convert a person from kind of an unknown to a customer. And what we're trying to do in your business, or what I want to stress tonight, is getting you to understand what that means, what really happens, and what happens from your customer experience that takes them from an unknown all the way to a customer. As well as what I want you to start thinking about differently is understanding that you can't always shortcut the process. Meaning, for a lot of us, we'll just start posting buy now links on Facebook or buy now links in different places. And while there's nothing wrong with doing some promotions on Facebook, absolutely, because people may be primed and ready. But you have to remember, when customers are on, we'll take Facebook or Twitter or any of these social media platforms, you're going to have a mixed bag of people. You're going to have people who've never heard of you, people who maybe followed you because of a link, and you may have people who have known about you for a few weeks or a few months or something like that. So therefore, we want to make sure that it's great to have the kind of sale item because you want to be able to convert people who are there, but we have to make sure that there's some marketing, there's some sales support for the people that are not at that buying stage. And maybe not at that buying stage just because, not because they have a problem with your product or service, but just because they're really not there yet. They just got started. They just started liking you. They just started following you. And we got to make sure that you have a process in place to pull them through the stages that it takes to do that. And we'll talk tonight about what some of those stages and what they look like. So how does that sound so far? Some of you guys nodding your head there. Have you, maybe quick question just to the group, how many people already have a funnel in place or don't have a funnel in place but wish they had a funnel in place? Just let me know. You can post in the comments on the page. So from that, we're talking about a funnel. And for most people, they're like, okay, Stephanie, I got the concept. I understand what you mean. There's steps and stages, and I'll walk you through those. But what you have to do is, the steps and stages are going to be different. So some of you might have been sitting back and saying, but Stephanie, for me, it's going to be different than the other person. Absolutely. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to build a funnel, a sales process that is specific to you and your business, to you and your customers, to you and your product. Now, we're going to leverage some of the basics. We're going to leverage some of the things that are industry specific. We're going to leverage as much as we can that has worked, maybe even in the past, or for you, or maybe someone who has an adjacent product. But what we're trying to do is constantly mold this process and this flow to fit who you are. And depending on who your business is, and I like to break things up kind of in these three buckets, where you're kind of a transaction business. And what I mean by that is you do maybe online retail, maybe you have book sales, maybe you have a class, maybe you host events. Maybe you do cooking classes. Maybe you do just pure, even if you have a brick and mortar store or have a physical store where you sell food or a cafe or anything like that, where it's high transaction, you're going to have a little bit different business. What you're going to be looking at is trying to build not only a process flow, but we're probably going to have a little bit more of an automated process. And the reason being is because there's so many transactions that are flowing through. You may be trying to sell 20 items, 100 items, 500 items a day or a week, depending on the size of your business. And when you're trying to sell that much in those amounts of transactions, 1,000 transactions and so forth, often your sales flow is going to have a large amount of automation to it so that you're communicating, you're sending information out, you're prospecting, you're nurturing people, but it can happen on a continual basis just because of the pure volume of the people. You're just not on what they call high touch business. Some of you may be more in a package or program. Maybe you do coaching or consulting, whether it's on the fitness side, maybe it's on the vegan lifestyle side, maybe it's a health coach, anything that kind of often takes more of a little bit of automation, but also a little bit of personal touch. You're going to get on the phone with someone. Maybe you're going to do a free consult, a 15-minute call, or, those types of processes where you're taking someone through. Maybe you have some online programs. So people are doing a 5-part video series or some type of training that is done online. Same idea. This is where you're going to have a little bit of a blend of maybe some automated marketing or sales components, and then you're going to be semi-automated. And then the last group are people who are doing things maybe on a contract level. Maybe you're doing them deals. So maybe you're in the food business and you're doing things more on the wholesale side. maybe you're doing kind of long-term agreements, you're doing 6-month coaching or 6-month programs, they're going to look a little bit different than if you're just doing an hour consult or if you're doing a 3-hour or a 5-week training package. So one thing I want you to do is kind of figure out which bucket you're in and look at the examples I have here, because this is going to help you as you build your flow out, because you'll understand that we're going to build something that's more automated for you if you're in a small transaction. If you're going to be more in that package place, you're going to build something that's a little bit semi-automatic. If you're on the contracts and the deal, you may have something that's more personal, but it is something that's repeatable. It's something, a process that even if it does means phone calls, if it does means personal emails or proposals or agreements, those agreements will be boilerplates. Those proposals will be boilerplates. And what we'll do is we'll leverage some of that template and then add some personalization on top of that. Does that kind of make sense so far? Does everyone kind of feel what I mean and feel what I'm saying? And because the key here is when you're building your sales process, I think where people fall down is they think you just pull a process off the shelf. You just kind of say, yeah, I'll just do these 5 things and this will work. And sometimes you don't get that results that you want because we didn't build some specifically to your business. So first step, if you have a sheet of paper out, is write down the type of business you are, because I'm going to go through and give you examples, and I'm going to examples in these 3 buckets. So this will help you kind of guide you through today's webinar. All right. So after we know what kind of business, we know we're kind of living in an automatic or semi-automatic world. And keep in mind, these are my suggestions when I say automatic and semi-automatic. You may sit down and say, for my business, I want it to be 100% automatic, even though I'm in the consulting bucket. And that's perfectly fine. But that's a decision you're going to make. And that's why I have that kind of step 2. Now, step 3 is this is where we're getting closer and closer to starting to understand our customers, understanding our sales, so we can start driving that revenue, so we can start really building our business around sales. And that happens with you documenting the current sales process. So how many of you guys are already documented your sales process? And what I mean by that is not when someone picks up the phone and talks to a sales rep or talks to a customer service person, or when someone gets to your website and pushes a button to actually buy, but I mean the full sales process, meaning how many steps does it take? And I'll kind of even jump into this in our next slide, for a person to go from unknown, never met you, never heard of your business, never heard of the brand, haven't interacted with you, to becoming a customer. And what I'm doing in this slide is I'm just trying to give you an idea, meaning, does it take 4 steps before someone will complete an order? Now, like I mentioned before, most of the time it's more like 7, 12. It's really a high number. For the purposes of the slide, I just put the 4 here to give you a general idea. Now, for many of you, if you've never done this before, if you haven't built this process out, if you don't have visibility to this, then start with 4 steps. You don't want to try to build 7 and 12 when you haven't done the basics. So start with 4 steps. And what I want you to do here, and what we're trying to do is, first, I want you to document from your customer's perspective, what are they doing? And then I want you to document from your perspective, what sales process have you put in place? And what I mean by that is, what are the tools that you're using? If someone comes in and they don't completely know you, are they coming in through Yelp? Maybe you have a promotion set up with Yelp, you're leveraging Yelp, you're getting a lot of customers through Yelp. Are they coming in through referrals, or are they coming in social media? That's what I kind of call that step 1. Then step 2 is, once they come in through one of those channels, where do they go from there? Do you push them to your blog? Do you have them join your email list? Do they click a contact form? What do they do as that next step? And then step number 3, are you doing something like, are you promoting to them at that point, saying, buy my book? Are you having them fill out a form? Are you going to have them join an event, maybe a webinar, maybe a local meetup? Maybe you're going to be at the local Veg Fest or some of the events, or I know summertime's coming up, so there's tons of festivals and all that good stuff. Maybe you're going to be there and you're going to encourage them to come. What's that 3rd step? And then what's step number 4? How do you take a person from that final step over to completion? And like I said, for many of you, this is going to be much bigger than 4 steps. But like I said, let's just get started with step 4 to get you over to 5. And for some of you, it may be sending out people product samples, or maybe you do sampling in the grocery store, so you do product demos. If you're more on the consulting side, maybe you do a 15-minute preview or a 5-minute preview talk with someone. So maybe someone asks for a demo. If you have maybe a little bit more of a complicated product or sell, or if you're doing something around fitness, maybe, for example, maybe you come out, you work with them, maybe you do kind of personal coaching or personal fitness coaching, in-home coaching or something like that. You may actually go out to their home for the initial session. So depending on your business, like I said, we're going to try to make this nice and personal, and specific to what your brand stands for. But the idea is, let's understand those steps. But the key is doing this in two pieces. Number one, for your customer, or from your customer's perspective, and number two, from your perspective. And what I mean by that is, what you may find is customers are finding you not in the ways that you realize they're finding you. Meaning they may find you in Twitter and you've been doing a lot of your marketing in Facebook. They may be finding you in Yelp and you didn't even realize that people were putting reviews on Yelp. Or they may be finding out about your book in Goodreads, as an example, and you didn't even realize that Goodreads was blowing up and all this great traffic is. So that's why I want to make sure you're looking at it from those two different perspectives. And to get there, I've already asked some of these questions, but the thing that you want to do as you're documenting and writing it down, and use it just like I did here on this page, is create those columns and just start with 1, 2, 3, and just go through those simple steps. But what you want to do is make sure you understand how many steps those are. And if you don't have visibility to all of them, don't worry. Just write down as many as you can. Say, I think it's about 10. I have visibility to 6, because that's the first stage of how we understand, and also how we eventually act on this and turn this into a way to drive sales. All right. Now, I put some questions down here just to help kind of get the creative juices flowing and get you really kind of thinking about, how do I build the sales funnel? The other thing to think about is, when you're starting to document what's currently happening in your business, is put a star next to anything that you think has the biggest impact. Like if there's a step in the process that you found that people really like, you've gotten great feedback from, put a star next to that, because that's going to be something that we're going to try to maybe enhance or replicate so that we can drive a little bit more sales. The other thing you want to think about when we do these two different versions is, are customers kind of finding you a different way than what you had originally designed? And does that mean that you want to do your marketing differently? Meaning, will we market on platforms that you haven't been marketing, promoting on, or building out social platforms because customers are finding you there, so that we create this good blend between your process, or what you thought was the natural flow, versus theirs? Okay. So hopefully that makes sense. Any questions so far? I'm just going to jump on our different platforms here to make sure I didn't miss any questions from you guys. It looks like we're doing pretty good so far. All right. The other thing I want to say is, the big step in this process is not only understanding what are those stages when people are, getting to know your product, getting to know who you are and buy. But the biggest thing we have to understand is, how does this link to the standard sales stages? And this is what I mean by understanding sales. You're understanding sales from your business standpoint. It's kind of one pillar. We're understanding sales from the customer standpoint of how they flow through and what process does it take them to become a customer. And then we're going to link it to, what are the standard sales stages? And what I mean by that is, often people go through stages before they become a customer. So when you see I did that kind of step 1, 2, 3, and 4, you could kind of link it even to this and say suspect stage is 1, prospect stage is 2, lead page is 3, and opportunity page is 4. Now, often there are more steps underneath these. So often, you're, like I said, you're going to end up with 12 steps. So you may have 2 or 3 steps in each one of these phases. But the reason I set it up here, just to kind of get us started, and especially many of you maybe haven't done this before, is what we want to make sure is that even if you have a process in place, even if your customers are kind of finding their way, or in some cases stumbling their way through the sales process, we want to make sure that your process works for you. And what I mean by that is, we don't want to have any gaps. We don't want to take people from, we don't want to have a process in place that only nurtures people who are suspects and leads, and we miss people who are prospects or opportunity. And what I mean by that is what often happens when a sales process is maybe a little bit customer designed is it's often the customer kind of finding their way through the clutter and through the mud. Or when you're a young business and you're just starting out, what often happens is for most people, they're not doing the prospecting, you're not looking at, you don't have the kind of suspect database, you're doing the lead generation. All you're trying to do is hit people or hope you're hitting people on that opportunity sign. So, what I want to do tonight is kind of inspire you to make sure in your business you have these steps. And what that means is sitting down, like I just did, like we just said, in that one step of putting down, okay, step one, step two, step three, step four, and then going back to those and saying which one of those phases is my suspect phase. Which one of those stages is my prospect? Which one of those stages are leads? And which one of those are opportunities? Now, how do you get to that? So for some of you may be like, well, I don't even know what these words mean or why is even irrelevant. So let me give you a little background, and then I think it will start to come a little bit more into visibility. What these stages mean are they just represent how people buy. Often what happens is someone becomes a suspect. And I know it can sound like a weird word, but these are really just people who are in your database. These are people in some way have gotten connected with you. And social media is a very common place that people become suspects. Because for many of you, you probably have experienced this where you're like, I have 25,000 people or I have 50,000 people on Facebook, but not everyone's liking my page, or I don't have a ton of traffic, or people aren't signing up for my email list, or they're not doing this and that. And often that's because they may be stuck in this suspect phase. What they've done is they've done the minimum of liking your page, but we haven't nurtured them enough to move them up the process so that they can become customers. We're just expecting that if they comment one or two times, they're probably potential customers. And that's not always the case. Often people will end up in your database for different reasons. And we have to actively do things to convert them or move them along. So that's what I mean by suspect. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to move someone from that kind of just general suspect section over to prospect. Now, prospects really, I believe, are a group of people who've done something. They've acted on something. These are people who maybe subscribed or downloaded your ebook. They have done something that's not high commitment, but it is a commitment level. They've done something to show a little bit more action than just a like or just a retweet or something like that. You really are trying to get them to take an action. And often these are people that are showing some interest because they're looking for a solution. They're looking for advice. They're looking for ideas. Now, when we say they're looking for a solution, it doesn't mean they think you're the solution yet. This just means they are interested. And it also means that they may not buy for 6 months. They may not buy for a year. They're just in a phase where they're just considering for different reasons, and so forth. So what you're trying to do is understand who is in that phase. And what we want to do from a marketing standpoint is put tools in place to nurture someone from that prospecting phase over to lead. And lead normally means that someone's been pre-qualified. They have taken kind of that next stage or next phase of action that actually gets them closer to someone who's showing a little bit more dedication, a little bit more interest. This may be someone who shows up to one of your free webinars. This may be someone who shows up to one of your free classes. This may be someone who comes out to an event or comes to a product demo event that you have. This is someone who's taking that greater commitment, and you're able to kind of pre-qualify them in some way, because most people are not going to take that higher level of commitment of showing up, going somewhere, interacting with you, maybe doing a live chat or something like that, unless they are starting to lean towards not only having interest in what you do, but interest in the fact that you do what you do. And then the last one is where we really want to take someone from lead to opportunity. Now, for some of you in your business, it may feel like, Stephanie, this is a little muddy. I'm struggling with what's the difference between a lead and an opportunity. And depending on your business type, these will be different. So in a manufacturing business versus a service-based business versus maybe a retail business, these will feel different. These will absolutely feel different. And we don't have enough time tonight for me to kind of say, in your business, this is what a lead looks like, and this is what an opportunity looks like. That's something we'd have to do in a follow-up call. But what I'd recommend, and also what we will get to in the next webinar, is I will have some charts to show you some of the specific differences in many of those businesses. But what I want you to do tonight, and kind of your, I guess I could say, homework between today and the next webinar next month, is start to document, do you have marketing in each one of these buckets? And what we want to do is we want to overlay that with the chart that we looked at before. So where you have these steps 1, 2, 3, and 4, we want to say which one of these steps in step 1 that you've identified, is this a prospect or suspect stage? Is this a prospect, suspect, lead, or opportunity phase, and so forth? Because that's going to help us determine, do you have all phases covered, and do we have marketing in place to move someone from stage to stage to stage? Does that make sense? Does that sound like at least the baseline kind of approach? Does that kind of get you to nod your head, and you're starting to kind of see where I'm going? I hope it does. Like I said, if you have any questions in the meantime, just let me know. I'm not seeing too many questions on the page, so just let me know if you guys are having any trouble posting your questions. And I know a lot of people said they weren't going to be able to make it tonight. So if you are watching this from a replay, feel free to post these on the page, because I will definitely come back and look at it. Okay, so now we have the stages. And like I said, this is your homework. So you're going to just work through these step by step by step. The next thing you want to do is we want to make sure we gather some direct feedback from your customers, because the challenge with understanding what's currently happening in your business, some of you may struggle and say, well, I really don't know. I don't know how my customers are finding me. So what we may have to do is do some surveys. We may have to do some polls. We may have to do some focus groups. We may have to use some of these tools so we have that direct line of communication, so you know how they're finding you, what tools made them, buy, what do they like about your company, things like that. Now, the way to do this more in a natural way is not to send out a big fat survey with 10, 20, 30 questions, especially if you are more of a flow business. You have transactions all the time. Maybe you do things where you're interacting with your customers on a frequent basis. What you want to do is instead look at ways, and I listed some of these ideas at the bottom, is how do you automate it? Do you have a survey link that goes into the confirmation email, so that automatically when a person signs up for an event, if you want to get some feedback on the process, their experience, or how they found you, you put that in the actual survey. Or you can include it into the process, just like many people put things like, how did you hear about us, in the process. That's a way to start to automate it or automatically grab that information. If you're a transaction business, you may add it in that, 14 days after the product's delivery, they get an email. Maybe you're going to do something where you're going to leverage social media. You may do some polls. You may set it up that every week you do a poll asking people about asking them for feedback, their thoughts on certain things that you implement in your business and you change. It's another great way to do it. And then the last thing I really love doing is kind of that semi-annual feedback session, where you kind of make it a special event and you ask people to kind of show up for a special feedback session. It's a live session. It feels more like a focus group where you're asking people general questions about your business. This works really well if you're more on that, like I said, that kind of group that was all the way to the left, just to remind you, that contract and deal section or deal business, those work really well. And for the packages, you can do it for a transaction-based business. I'm not saying you don't, but I find that works really well. So you want to figure out either A, how do you grab that information now so we can make sure we input it into the process, or B, like I said, this is your next level of homework, is how do we make sure we can automate and integrate it into what you're currently doing so we can continually pull that information. Okay, so now that we've laid the groundwork, okay, now this is what we want to do. We want to understand our customers. We want to understand where people are in their stages and what is the current flow. What you want to do is build the ideal path. Meaning how, like I had here before, remember I had all these boxes were blue. Now what we want to do is we want to say, what is the ideal path? What are the ideal 4, 7, 12 steps that you think people will go through that you'll get the best results? And that's how you build your sales flow. That's how you build a stellar and amazing process. And start with something basic. You're going to start with this little graph. And like I said, I'm using this to get you started, get you kind of moving through the process and getting more comfortable with how this works. But ultimately, what we're trying to build is this. And the reason I wanted to show you this is because I want to keep things simple, basic, and I want to make it so you can act on these things right away. But I do want to show you where we're going. I do want to show you how we really get to that stage that we're going to get to, and how we're also kind of, I guess, giving you a sneak preview of the next webinar. Because what we're going to do is we're going to take a very basic process like this, which is your homework of building out 4, 7, or 12 stages. And what are those ideal stages? And when I say ideal, what I mean is looking at what your customer has done, looking at what you've set up in the past, or if you haven't done anything in the past, or you don't have any customer information, just sitting down and saying, how am I going to use marketing to move people through these processes? Do I use social media? Do I use email marketing? Am I using forms? What am I actually going to use? And then ultimately, we're going to build a process like this. And let me walk you through this. I know it's probably a little bit tiny on your screen, so I'll send you a copy of the slides so you can definitely look at it. But like I said, we're going to break this down in the next webinar totally. But I want you to see where we're going. I also want you to envision how this process truly works. And also the reason I'm showing you this is because when you get to this level of detail, this is where and how you start to drive sales. So if you're ready for this, meaning you have a basic idea of the touch points, you're going to dive into something like this. And what I'm going to recommend is you take a sheet like this, you just blank it out, and you're going to start writing in for you, how do you want to do this? If you're just getting started, you're going to stick with this slide first and just get an idea, what are some of those basic steps? And then we'll walk you through in the next webinar how to migrate over here. But let me give you an idea, kind of a peek into what we want to build, why we're going to build it, and how this works, and how this really translates into sales. And the reason it translates is because what you start to do, and as you can see here, the slide's just only but so big, so I can only show you the prospect, the lead section, and then obviously bringing you into the opportunity section, which is kind of where your sales, your ticket sales are. I didn't put the suspect stage in here just for a lack of size, not because we don't want to be doing anything there. But what I want to kind of stress to you here is you're going to take each one of those buckets, that prospecting phase, and we're ultimately going to say, how do I prospect in my business? How do I pull people into my business so I can give them exposure to who I am, what I do, and what I offer? Now, these items will be different depending on who your business is and what product. You may be doing demos in grocery stores if you're going to be doing food products. You may be doing Facebook ads if you're doing a lot of online training. You may be an author, so you're going to be doing more guest blog posts or writing articles in local magazines and so forth. So we have to figure out what the right bullet points here. I don't want you to look at these bullet points and go, well, I'm not sure if this works for my business. What you're going to do is you're going to build these bullet points specifically for your business. So that orange box, that's going to be you sitting down and saying, how do I want to prospect my customers? How do I want to pull these in? And the reason I list 5 bullet points here is at the end of the day, we need multiple lanes of traffic pulling people into your business. Because if you only build one, meaning you just do guest blog posting, or you just do a podcast, or only do some Facebook ads, everything has a cycle in business. And just like advertising can have a cycle as well. And the challenge is if you only stick to one channel, maybe 2 channels, sometimes things dry up. Sometimes just because of the nature of the channel. Sometimes you may have the copy and the materials you've used, they've kind of run their course. Or sometimes things change, meaning your blog that you've been writing to and posting to is giving you all this great traffic, and that blogger decides to shut down their blog, or they decide to stop doing guest blog posts or anything like that. And to safeguard you kind of against the natural things that happen in life where things kind of ebb and flow, I recommend you really want to start with 2 to 3 of these prospecting items. You eventually want to grow into at least 5 to create some really strong stability in your business. And as you can see there, I'm trying to give you a cross section. You may end up being more of an affiliate type of business where you have affiliates pushing people into your business versus you may be someone who does a lot of interviews, a lot of talks, maybe you do a lot of speaking engagements, maybe you travel all over the US throughout the year because you speak at a lot of Veg Fest. So there's a lot of different ways that you can prospect and bring people in. And then what we want to do is we want to sit down and you want to take that lead section. So you see that gray bar? That whole section is building leads. And that is when someone gets prospected, where do we send them to turn them into a lead? How do we nurture them? Are they going into a free video where they can put in comments? Are they downloading an ebook? If they sign up to download an ebook, do they get an instant ebook because they get on an AR, just means autoresponder? Then do they get a thank you page at the top? And in that thank you page, are they sent to your blog? So what you should start to see and hopefully feel as I'm talking is this process starts to flow. So instead of a person kind of coming to your website and they just go there and that's it. Instead, what we do is we advertise with a specific purpose to bring them to a specific page, like a free video, asking them while they're watching the video with a big fat button there to click a button to download a cheat sheet that gets them on the AR, that sends them to the thank you page, that sends them over to your blog. So what happens is your marketing now is working together. We're not just doing one thing and hoping people stumble into the sales process. And then even from that, when a person gets on your email list, and that's what I mean when I say they get on your AR, you may set it up so there's an automated process. You may have them set up so that they get an automatic invite to your next meetup, if you do meetups or you do events. Maybe if you are doing a lot of festivals or something like that, you may send them a list of all the events in your area. So in your town, like I lived in San Diego, and San Diego had like festivals like all the time. It was so awesome. So you may send them a calendar of what's on tap in April or what's on tap in May or something like that. And that's a great way to pull people in, let them know where you are, let them know to come by and see your booth and so forth. Maybe you're doing webinars. It really depends on your business. Maybe you're going to do product unveilings. A lot of people who maybe are more in the fashion business, they'll do things like, they'll preview or give people a sneak peek or a lookbook on the actual products that are coming out. Same thing happens if maybe you're doing a product and you're coming out with, maybe you did vegan soap and you're coming out with vegan skincare products, and you're coming out with a whole line, and the lines of the skincare products or the lotions will have similar smells or similar scents as the soaps that have been so successful. Same idea. You may put in that auto responder, an opportunity for people to join a webinar, join an in-person event. And like I said, this doesn't have to be all online. This is how you start to link things together. Then from that, if they show up or they attend or they click yes, they may get an automatic 3-part series. And then in the end of that 3-part series email, they're going to get a coupon. And all of this, like I was saying, is automated. Now, for some of you, I might be blowing your mind. You're like, oh my goodness, Stephanie, I don't have time to build all of this. And that's okay. You don't have to build it all at once. We can get started with 1 or 2 prospect tools, 1 or 2 items in your lead. But what I want you to do is see the full vision. And what I want you to do, especially from this webinar and how to leverage this webinar, is start to really think about these touch points and these items to put in place in your business and start to test. If you've already put some of this in place and you're like, it's not working, then what we need to do is make sure, do we have any gaps? Do we have a true flow that not only takes someone from prospect over to leads, but also pulls them into sales? Because what I find for most people is the sales part is tricky. They kind of don't want to be too aggressive, or they're way overly too aggressive. So you kind of got to find that right balance. And what I tell a lot of people is to try to do your marketing in chunks. So if you're going to do things like sales, ticket sales, because maybe you're doing a cooking class or something like that, is design a 4 or 5-part email for your sales. And this is how you're, converting people into that opportunity to close. And what that means is, instead of setting up one email and saying, hey, buy my product, or this is a great product, or you should really get this product, is think about how are you going to email them over the course of time to get them to buy. Because the first time someone sees a buy now button, it doesn't mean they're going to click on it. But it also doesn't mean because they didn't click that they don't want it. So what I tend to do is I'll build 3, 4, 5, 6 email series together, with one email meaning it may be the save the date with a link, one email may be the early bird offer, one email may be the last time to sign up. And then the other emails may be combo emails, meaning they're going to have some blog post in it, but also a reminder of an event that I have coming up, a reminder for if I'm doing it for a customer of a product that's for sale. It may have a reminder of maybe a client if they're doing an expo or um, a veg fest or a conference or something like that. So what you're doing is you're mixing in not only giving content and great information with your promotion, but you build that all together. And by building that all together, now you're building a flow around your sales, as opposed to building newsletter and newsletter and newsletter in pieces or every 2 weeks. What you're doing is saying, okay, over the next 5 weeks, over the next 6 weeks, or over the next 2 months, this is the push I want to do. This is how I want to educate people on my products, on all my services, or my reminders for their subscription plan. And I build that together. And that's how you start to drive sales. Because now what you're doing is you're looking at it holistically. You're pulling people through the process, and you're building marketing tools with the same hat on at the same time. And then finally, the last piece is you want to build kind of a process for that repeat customer base. And we'll talk a little bit more about it next month. So I don't want to overwhelm you. I don't want to give you too much, but I also want to give you enough so we get you fired up and you guys are like, yeah, I can do this. I'm going to put this together. I'm going to start working on it. So please, 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 use these templates, print out these slides. When I email them over to you, they'll come after the webinar. The slides, I believe, go out on Friday after webinars because they go with your replay links. Is print these out and use these as tools to help you build this sales funnel. Because if you start to build this, you'll start to see those sales. And like I said, for lack of size, I put 3 buttons at the ticket sales section. But in all reality, I probably would build, like I said, about 6 emails at a time. Now, remember, you can build them, you can schedule them, and at any time, if you have to change them or alter them, you can definitely do that. But this is the kind of flow. Now, for some of you, you may say, well, Stephanie, I don't have just one product, or I don't just have one service. Then you build that around those services, those products, especially the ones that complement each other. Now, for some of you, you may say, well, I have kind of 2 sides of my business. I kind of do the service side, but I also have a product side. And that's perfectly fine. You're going to have kind of a sales flow for the product side, and you'll have a sales flow for the service side. And then you also may have a sales flow to upgrade people or cross promote between the two. And the reason it's important to build these things is because you have to find what works well for your business. You have to find, maybe I bring them in on services and then I can move them or cross-sell them into product, or vice versa. Or you may find that people work very well. You take them through the entire funnel, through the entire flow. And once they actually buy, then that's someone who may be interested in deeper services, bigger contracts, longer engagements, and so forth. So some of this stuff, I want to give you the big picture, and I also want to give you the stuff that's actionable, but also keep in mind this is stuff you're going to tweak, you're going to test, you're going to build over time. But as far as things to do today and to get started, like we talked about in this webinar, kind of kicking off, is what I want you to do is start to think about what are those steps in the process, what steps fall into each one of these buckets. And then ultimately what I want you to do, especially if you're at that phase, if you're brand new to this is probably going to be an exercise of just documenting and getting this information down. If you've done this before, or you've created some of this, but you realize that maybe you've kind of neglected it, you haven't looked at it in a long time, maybe you haven't done everything that you hoped you would do, then what you want to do is look at your current database and label who's where. Because what you may find is someone jumped all the way to lead phase and then they didn't make it to opportunity, so they almost ended up being the suspect bucket. And what that means is this may be people who are on your email list, but basically they're just on your email list. They don't engage, they don't do much, they really haven't been clicking on links, but they are there. And what we're going to do as far as an action plan is what you're going to do is create an action plan for anyone who's in each one of these buckets. And what we're going to do is take the phases that you built in your process and leverage and promote them to that person in that stage. So, for example, if you decided that, hey, I want to move people from my suspect databases. So that means people who are maybe idle on email. I shouldn't say idle, but idling on email, or people who've been in my social media databases. I want to reactivate them. I want to get them engaged again. I want to pull them in. Then you may do something where you have them resubscribe or subscribe to a new list, or get a quick cheat sheet, or get some type of document that actually engages them and pulls them in. And you're actually going to use some type of promotion to kind of pull them in. And then obviously once you pull them in or move them from bucket 1 to bucket 2, then you pull them through the process. The same thing. We want to sit down and say, did we have any leads? Did we have people who said they were interested? Maybe people who said they were interested in consults. Maybe you have a group of people that signed up for 15-minute consults, but they didn't convert. We want to go back to that database of people, and we want to see what can we do of the new ideal process that you put in place, whether it's this one or whether it's this one. We want to take that process and see, how do we take someone who's in that lead section and migrate them over to opportunities. And what happens is, by doing it this way, this allows you to test that process, because you already have people in these little buckets. And what we can do is directly take a piece of the funnel that you built and promote it to someone who's in one of these segments and move them along. And if we see success in that, then that allows you to roll it out on a big scale. That will make sense to say, okay, I got to pay for the infrastructure. I got to put it all in MailChimp. I got to get all these emails edited. All that stuff will make sense, because what you've done is you've done a pilot run on anyone who's in any of these buckets. And that's the key. That's how you start to take kind of this theory and the concept and the idea that I want to understand what's happening in sales. I want to understand the flow, and I want to understand why people are buying from me and what they're interested in and why they keep coming back, or why they become interested and they actually don't buy and don't, maybe make that leap. What we're able to do now is, by looking at it through this lens, we can start to understand where our people are, test and try different strategies to move them there. And then the last couple of things I just want to give you as we wrap up today's webinar is also some tips, some tools and things that will help you get there. Because for some of you, you may say, okay, Stephanie, I get what you're saying. Social media may be in my first stage, or one of those types of tools, Yelp or one of those items. Maybe my next stage is something that I'm going to be using for subscriptions and so forth. But how do I get all that done? And the key here is sitting down and actually saying, what are my lead generation tools? Am I using lead pages? Am I using sales pages? Do I need to get thank you pages in place? And this is an internal assessment, and really kind of a look at what you're doing and how things are working. Do you also need to look at your ordering process? You may find that people aren't making it from that opportunity to buy just because it's difficult to order. Your website's running slow. Maybe the ordering form is an old form that you've had in place. Maybe you need to update your shopping cart to a newer shopping cart. Do you need some forms that people can reorder quickly? You want to do that assessment and do that look, because that's going to be a great way for you to determine where you can identify some efficiencies in the process and hopefully drive more sales. The other thing is, start to look at making templates. If you are definitely on that contract side, and even if you're in kind of those consulting and training, especially if you do something that's more one-on-one as opposed to like an online training program, is start to see what you can do about creating the templates that you need around prospecting and proposals and standard pricing. What I find for a lot of people is the reason it slows them down or they're not able to convert is because it takes them 2 weeks or 3 weeks, 2 days, 3 days, 4 days to write up a proposal. That's something that if you are a proposal-based business, you should be able to figure out, how do I turn that around in a couple of hours? And what do I need to make that more of a seamless process to help me through this phase? The other thing is, think about how contracts are going to work. And this is more important when you're in the wholesale side or you're doing longer agreements and so forth. Is there a cancellation clause? If someone wants to work with you one-on-one once a week for 2 hours or for 1 hour, what happens if someone wants to do more hours, or they want to add a kicker in, or they want to extend the contract? You want to have all that in place. That's going to help you move people not only to customers faster, but also get that repeat business. And then the last thing we had mentioned earlier is use as many templates as you can. Come up with your series of welcome emails, proposal follow-up emails, thank you emails. And some of these emails will be emails that you use from a conversion standpoint, meaning anytime you send out a proposal, you have a standard email that is your proposal follow-up if someone doesn't convert. And like I said, it may be 80% standard and then 20% you personalize based on the conversation or based on the client. Putting those things in place are really going to help you speed things along, are going to help you communicate quicker, interact faster, and ultimately convert more people, as well as it's going to lighten your load. Same thing goes from email marketing standpoint. So we're hitting things from the prospect side or maybe the more suspect side as opposed to the lead side, is create templates. So if you do a lot of cooking classes, you should have a cooking class email template. And you use a very similar template each time, where the date is, where the price for the event is, where the location is, where you put the links and so forth. Because if people are going to be repeat customers and people who are coming to your site more than once or signing up for your events, you want to make it simple, want to make it easy, you want to make it simple so that if they refer to other people, it's very clear, the colors, branding, all that stuff is consistent. Same thing with your products. If you're doing your product promotions, come up with a template on how do you announce new products or announce new um, fragrances or product launches, or if you're going to be doing a series in your books and you've done the first book and you're planning to do 2 or 3 more follow-up books, come up with a template that you can leverage so that A, you can get it out faster, and then B, what happens is it starts to create a standard way of communication that people understand, people get excited about, and be able to act on faster because they understand where those buttons are, where they can quickly say, yep, I'm interested, I want to sign up, and so forth. So with that, we're coming to the end of the webinar. So I want to just see if we have any questions on today's topic so far. The only question I got from the group, hold on, I'm just looking around here real quick, is someone asked the question about how do I get started if I've never put a process in place like this before? And they were saying that, they're a solopreneur and they don't have a lot of resources. So what should they do? So if you don't have a lot of resources, you want to start with a more simplified approach. You want to start with maybe something similar to this, because what you're trying to do is just get a general idea of what are those steps and just connect those dots. So if you're going to promote things on social media or promote things or get people excited on social media, you want to decide, am I sending people to my blog? And if I send them to my blog, do I have an email box at the end of my blog post? Do I have a pop-up on my blog? Do I have a slide in? What do I have to help get people signed up and into your actual sales funnel? And just think of it more step by step by step approach. So how do I get that information out? How often will I promote it? How many different offers will I have? So would I have 3, 4, 5? Because you don't want to send out the same one all the time. And then from there, what do you have people do? If they get on your email list, they get a couple of emails, how do you take them further along in the process if they're interested? We're not trying to bully people. We're not trying to push people. What we're trying to do is make it easy. So do you have a link in there where someone can sign up and get more information from you? Do you have a link in there where people can find out more information because you're going to do maybe a reading of a chapter from your book? Or you're going to do some interviews and people can listen in and so forth. And literally keep it simple. We're just looking for 4 or 5 We want 4 or 5 steps. And then what you want to do is create notes at the bottom of the page and list how would you go from step to step to step? How would a customer flow and why would they be interested in flowing? And what kind of marketing support do you need to make that happen? And literally, this is something that probably should take you, if you're doing this version, this should probably take you about an hour to put together, maybe 45 minutes to an hour. And then once you've done this, what we want to do is just test it on a very basic, simple level. If you have done this before and you've kind of got it in all different phases and so forth, then you're going to be ready to start to move to a more integrated and more advanced level. And if you are at that phase, like I said before, you're going to start to at least just get this on paper And then once you get it on paper, we'll talk more and more in our next webinar about how do you make really strong landing pages? What do you do to create these really cool videos? How do you set up prospecting? How do you create some of these prospecting tools? Where do you start? Which ones do we recommend first, second, and third, and so forth? And we'll use that webinar to kind of dig in more of the application and decision making between this. But like I said today, really your key goal is to let's get this in place. Let's gather that feedback if we need it. Let's start to build your process. Let's start to, depending on where you are in the phase, maybe start to test promoting to people in some of these buckets, whether it's getting an ebook out and seeing how many people you can get signed up from your social media account, whether it's sending out 2 or 3 or 4 or developing 4 or 5 emails for your next cooking class and getting that into that prospect fade or that leads fade and seeing if we can get some results. And that's what we're doing. And that's really what I'm talking about tonight, is building a process, building these tools, understanding what your flow is, and then testing it from there. And what we want to do is see if we can find some wins, because once we find some wins, then we can scale it up. We can do it to all of your customers. You can do it to your entire customer base. We can roll it out to everyone. But like I said before, let's start in some of these buckets. And once we start in some of these buckets, we can test our way there and move forward. All right. So with that, that's going to wrap up today's webinar. I want to thank everybody for for joining us today. This is really exciting. I love doing these webinars. If I missed your question on the page, I'm going to refresh things. My internet's a little bit weird tonight just because I'm actually in the process of moving. And so I am buying a new house on Friday. I'm so excited about. But if I missed your question on the page, I will go back on the page and just comment on it and give you a quick answer there, as well as if you're watching this from a replay standpoint, please feel free to do that, and we'll get back in touch with you. So once again, thanks for joining us for Webinar Wednesday. This is Stephanie from Vegan Mainstream, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks. Bye.